Welcome, my family. Before we jump in, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. I would also love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Drop your answers and any suggestions in the comments, and I might give you a shout out at the end of my next video. Thanks for being here and for all your amazing support. I went to my uncle's old cabin for a week in winter. His name is Uncle Nikolai, and he asked me to check the place. He works on a fishing boat and could not go himself. The cabin sits in the woods, a few miles off a small road near Nenana. Tall black spruce stand close together. Snow covers the ground like a thick white blanket. In winter, the sun is slow and tired. Daylight is short. Nights are long and very quiet. I brought my dog, Kima. Kima is a smart husky with blue eyes. She likes cold air and sleeps near the door. I had food, wood, a radio, and a small lantern. The stove was old but strong. When it burned, the cabin smelled like sap and smoke. I felt safe there the first day. That first night, the wind rose. It hissed across the trees and blew thin snow like dust. The sky was clear and the stars looked sharp. I stacked more wood inside and shut the door tight. Kima curled into a ball. I boiled tea and listened to the stove click. Then I heard it. Heavy steps on the porch boards. 1, 2, 3, and then a slow turn like someone pacing. I put my cup down. Kima's ears lifted. She gave a low sound in her throat. The steps came again. Not running, just steady, back and forth. I went to the little window by the door. I lifted one corner of the curtain. The moon was bright on the snow. I saw the porch rail. I saw the front steps. I saw the yard, smooth and white and still. I did not see anyone. I stood there staring. No person, no animal, no shape at all. But the boards kept creaking. They creaked like weight was on them. Back and forth, back and forth. After a long time, the sound stopped. When I opened the door, the cold cut my face. Kima came to my side. We stepped onto the porch. The wood was dry and hard. The yard was smooth as glass, shaped by the wind. I looked for prints. There were none. In the morning, I checked again. Still nothing. The yard was a clean sheet. No dents, no marks, nothing. I told myself the wood had popped from a cold. Sometimes boards do that. The cold can crack trees like a gunshot. It can make the cabin sing and creak. I said that out loud just to hear a voice. The second night, the wind was softer. The sky was green with the northern lights. They moved and bent across the stars. It looked like the sky was breathing. I watched for a while, then went inside. I fed the stove and lay down. Kima slept by the door again. The steps came back. 1, 2, 3, turn 1, 2, 3, turn. They were heavier than before. I could feel them in the floor. Kima stood up and growled, deep and low. Her fur rose along her back. She stared at the door and did not blink. I did not open the door this time. I stayed by the window and looked out. The moonlight on the snow hurt my eyes. Nothing moved. Still, the boards creaked like boots. I waited, holding my breath. It went on for a long time. Then it stopped again. I slept only a little. In the morning, I went out with a broom. I swept the porch. I sprinkled a thin handful of wood ash in a line along the edge of the porch and down the top step. My uncle taught me that trick. Ash shows tracks even when wind is bad. I also hung a small bell on a fishing line from the rail. If someone touched it, it would ring. All day, I felt silly about it. I chopped more wood and listened to a crackling radio voice from Fairbanks. A man said it would be below zero again at night. He warned drivers to pack blankets. I looked at the line of spruce and the pale sun. At dusk, the world went blue. The third night was the coldest. When I breathed, ice fog hung in front of my face. The stove ticked and ticked. I sat with my boots on, coat near just in case. Kima did not sleep. She kept her head up and stared at the door. The little bell on the line did not move. Then the steps began. Slow, heavy, back and forth. They were close, right outside. I could feel each one through the floor. Kima growled until it turned into a dull hum. I went to the window and used my flashlight. I cupped my hand around the lens to keep the glare down. I aimed at the rail and porch. For a second, I saw only a white spin of snow. Then my light hit something dark and tall. Eyes looked back at me, big and wet and high up. They were too high to be a person. A long face steamed in the light. Frost clung to hair around its muzzle. It blinked. It was a moose. A cow big as a wall. She stood on the porch like she owned it. Her breath made clouds that drifted away. She took a slow step, and the boards answered with a groan. She took another step and turned. Back and forth, just like a person pacing in boots. My heart beat loud in my ears. I kept the light low and steady. Kima went quiet, tail tucked, eyes bright. The moose pressed her nose to the rail and licked it. She scraped the wood with her teeth, then licked again. I remembered what my uncle said. Salt draws them. Sweat from your hands sits in the wood. They'll come in winter and lick for hours. The wind was weak, but little crystals still moved across the snow. The yard looked smooth. The moose stepped off the porch. Her hooves sank only a little into the wind crust. She walked toward the willows at the edge of the yard and disappeared into the dark. The snow behind her filled in its own small dents. The yard looked clean again. I laughed, but it sounded shaky. I felt silly and also small. The sound in the night was only a moose. Only a moose, but still scary when you were alone. I told Kima it was fine. She wagged once and lay down again. I slept a bit but woke near dawn. I opened the door to check the ash line. It was still there. The bell was still. There were no marks. On the yard, I saw thin, chewed strips on the willow. That fit a moose. I found 2 brown hairs stuck to a splinter on the rail. That fit, too. I made breakfast and felt better. I told myself the mystery was over. It had to be. Then, when I swept the porch, I saw something strange. Under the window, in the corner where the snow could not drift, the ash line had a break. A small oval mark cut into it. It looked like the toe of a boot. Just the front, like someone had leaned in to look through the glass. It was not my boot. The shape was narrower. The angle was wrong for me. I had not stepped there. I crouched and stared at it for a long time. Maybe it was the end of the broom. Maybe I bumped it and forgot. I tried to fit the broom tip into the mark. It did not match. I set my own boot next to it. Mine was bigger. I felt the hair on my neck rise. I told myself, it's nothing. Snow fell from the roof. But the roof was dry. The mark was a neat half moon. It had the little ridges a boot sole makes. I wiped it with my glove and stood up fast, like standing would make the worry go away. That afternoon, I walked to my nearest neighbor. His name is Oiva. He lives a mile down the trail in a small house with a blue door. He is older and has a beard that freezes into white spikes. He gave me coffee and listened while I talked. When I said footsteps, he shrugged. Moose on porches happen, he said. Boards talking cold, too. When I told him about the boot mark, he looked away out the window. Anyone out on a night like that would be foolish, he said. Then he added, lock your door anyway. I thanked him and went back near sunset. The trail was narrow and held my steps. The wind felt tired again. The sky had a thin pink edge and then turned gray. I reached the cabin as the trees faded into the dark. That night, I set a new line of ash. I hung 2 bells. I put my boots by the door and kept my coat on a chair. Kima lay with her head on her paws, but did not close her eyes. I waited. The cabin ticked. The stove hummed. The radio cracked and then went silent. I could hear my own breath. The steps returned. They were soft at first, like they came from far away. Then they grew clear and heavy on the boards. Back and forth. Back and forth. Kima stood up and pressed against my leg. I went to the window. I did not turn on the light. I did not use the flashlight. I let my eyes settle into the dark. The porch lay in a gray square. The yard was a dim sea past it. A shape moved across the porch rail. The moose was back. I could see the pale line of her side and the darker shape of her head. She licked the rail again. The boards creaked under her weight. She turned, slow as the hour hand on a clock. She paced. My fear eased a little. It was only her, just like before. Then Kima made a sound I had never heard. It was not a growl. It was like a short bark squeezed out of fear. She stared not at the moose, but past the moose toward the side window by the stove. I turned my head. In the side window, in the glass, I saw a faint shape. Not outside. In the reflection, it looked like a hooded head close to the other window, the front one, like someone standing with their face near the pane. I spun back to the front window and pushed the curtain with 2 fingers. I leaned just enough to look straight down along the wall. There, inches from the glass, was a shadow where the porch corner hid from a moon. The shadow did not move. The moose clopped and turned. The bells did not ring. The ash line would keep its secret until morning. I held my breath and listened. I could hear the soft, quick sound of air through a nose. Not the moose. Different. Short. Human. Then the sound stopped. The moose lifted her head, ears forward. She stared into the same corner. She stood very still. All the world held its breath with her. Something shifted in the dark. It might have been a sleeve brushing wood. It might have been nothing but my heart roaring in my ears. The moose stamped once and swung her head. She stepped off the porch in 2 long moves and slipped into the gray yard. The shape by the window melted back along the wall, lighter than shadow, and was gone. I did not open the door. I did not speak. Kima pressed against me until my knee hurt, and I let her. We stood there a long time, until the board stopped talking and the wind came back and drew its veil over everything. When dawn finally came, the sky was dull and low. I opened the door. The bells were still. The ash line across the porch edge had small bumps and ridges, like breathing had moved across it. Near the front window, tucked into the corner the wind could not reach, I saw a mark that matched the one from before. This time it was full. A boot print. A whole heel and the toe. The tread was a broken chain pattern, like on some old army boots. Beside it was a second, smaller mark, as if the person had shifted their weight and leaned in closer to the glass. I placed my own boot next to the print again. Mine was bigger. I touched the tread with a glove. The ash held the lines like a stamp. My glove shook. I followed the porch to the step and looked out of the yard. The wind had smoothed it during the night. Beyond the porch, it was a blank page again. No path, no trail, no line. Only at the willow did I find the moose's fresh bite marks, pale against the bark. I swept the porch and took down the bells. I packed my bag and radioed Oiva. My voice was calm, but my hands were not. "I'm fine," I told him. "Just heading back a day early." He did not ask why. He said, "Road's clear enough. Take it slow." I left the cabin clean like my uncle taught me. I banked the stove and set the latch. Before I shut the door, I looked one last time at the window. My breath made a cloud on the glass. It faded and left my face looking back at me. For a second, I thought I saw another face behind mine, a trick of light and sleep and fear. I blinked, and it was only me. On the trail out, the cold bit my cheeks and made my eyes water. Kima trotted ahead, tail up, ears turning. The trees watched us pass. The wind pushed little lines across the snow and then erased them again. I have told this story a few times. People say the moose explains the steps. People say wind can hide tracks fast. People say cabins creak and ash can shift and make marks look like prints. Maybe that is all true. I want it to be true. But sometimes at night, when I'm back in town and the heat hums and cars pass on wet streets, I remember the sound of those boards. Back and forth, back and forth. And I remember how the ash held the tread of a boot in the one corner where the wind could not touch it. I do not have an answer for that. I only know what I heard, what I saw, and what the morning kept. The cabin sits in the woods still. Winter is long. Snow falls, wind blows, and the yard becomes a blank page again. Some nights, if you listen, the porch will start to talk. And in the morning, you may find nothing at all, or one clear print, waiting where the wind cannot reach. I work as a supply driver in Alaska. My job is simple. I load my truck with boxes of food, fuel, and gear and drive them to remote stations along the Dalton Highway. Most of the time, I travel during the day, but sometimes deliveries run late and I find myself driving at night. The Dalton is long, empty, and unforgiving. In winter, it's mostly ice, snow, and endless dark. Locals call it the Ice Road. One night in late January, I had to make a run from Fairbanks to a small outpost near Coldfoot. It was nearly 300 miles north, and the weather forecast warned of heavy winds and dropping temperatures. Still, the supplies had to get through. I loaded up at the yard, filled the tank, and checked my radio. Kerosene heaters, food, spare blankets, all strapped tight. By 6 in the evening, the sky was already black. Stars twinkled sharp above me, but low clouds were drifting in. I pulled onto the highway, and the city lights faded fast behind me. Driving the ice road at night is like driving into another world. There are no streetlights, no houses, no comfort of towns. Just white lines, black asphalt hidden under ice, and snow that blows like sand across the windshield. The only sound is the steady groan of the engine and the crunch of studded tires. Sometimes, when I pass a patch of frozen river, the truck shakes like it's rolling over glass. About 2 hours into the trip, the wind picked up. The snow started to whip across the road, and visibility dropped. I slowed to a crawl, gripping the wheel tight. The headlights lit up a wall of white, and beyond that, nothing. Radio chatter was dead quiet. No other drivers seemed to be around. That's when I saw it. Through the swirling snow, a shape appeared on the side of the road. At first, I thought it was a signpost or a small tree bent under the weight of snow. But as I drew closer, I realized it was a person. A man standing in the blizzard. He wore a parka with the hood pulled up, but his arms were bare and pale, hanging stiff at his sides. He raised one hand slowly, like he was flagging me down. I hit the brakes hard, the truck sliding a little before stopping. The man didn't move. He stood there, hunched against the wind, one hand still lifted. Every warning bell in my head told me to keep going. Nobody should be out there in that weather. Not without gloves, not without a vehicle, not without reason. Still, I opened my door. The cold slammed into me like a wall. I grabbed my flashlight and called out, "You need help?" The beam caught nothing. The man was gone. The road was empty. Only snow blew across the shoulder where he had been. No figure. No parka. No one waving me down. I stood there with the wind cutting my face, listening. There was no crunch of footsteps, no breathing, nothing. Just the howl of the storm. I swept the light over the ground. Snow covered everything, smooth and fresh. There were no footprints. My chest tightened. I told myself maybe I'd imagined him. Maybe my eyes played tricks in the snow. But I knew what I saw. A man standing there, arm raised. I climbed back into the cab, shut the door, and tried to calm down. The heater hummed, but I was shaking. I drove on slowly. My headlights cut through the white, and my wipers squealed against ice. I kept glancing at the mirrors, half expecting to see someone walking behind me on the road. But nothing was there. About 30 minutes later, the radio crackled. A weak, broken voice came through. "Help! Stuck! Mile marker 124. I froze. The voice was thin, desperate. Static swallowed most of it, but I caught enough. "Help, mile marker 124. I checked the odometer. I was at mile 122. 2 miles to go. The snow grew heavier as I pushed on. My headlights bounced off the white curtain. The road narrowed, edges hidden under drifts. Finally, my eyes caught the sign, mile 124. I slowed down, scanning both sides. Nothing but dark trees weighed down with snow. No truck, no car, no stranded driver waving for help. Just silence and storm. Then something banged against the back of my truck. A hollow, heavy thud, like a fist or boot kicking the cargo door. I jumped so hard the wheel slipped in my hands. The truck swerved before I straightened it. I checked the mirrors. Nothing. The road behind me was empty. I pulled over and killed the engine. The wind screamed against the cab. I grabbed my flashlight again and stepped into the storm. The beam swung across the trailer. The doors were closed tight, the locks still in place. No one was there. No prints in the snow. No sign anyone had touched the truck at all. I circled the rig twice, shining the light under the wheels into the trees down the road. Empty. Only my own footprints trailed behind me. I climbed back into the cab, locked the door, and sat with my hands shaking on the wheel. The radio crackled again. This time, the voice was clearer. "Please, so cold, mile marker 124. I stared at it, my mouth dry. The voice was the same, weak and broken, but it sounded close, like the man was whispering inside the cab. I ripped the radio cord out. Silence. Only the sound of the wind remained. I drove without stopping for the next hour. I didn't look in the mirrors again. I didn't answer the radio. I just kept the wheel straight and prayed for Coldfoot to appear. When I finally pulled into the outpost, it was after midnight. A few trucks were parked in the lot, their headlights dimmed. I walked into the station, shaking snow off my coat. The clerk looked up and frowned. "You all right? You look white as a ghost." I told him what happened. About the man on the side of the road. about the voice on the radio, about the banging on the truck. He listened, his face pale. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "You're not the first," he said. "Every winter, someone hears him around mile 124. Years back, a driver broke down in a blizzard out there. By the time help came, he was frozen stiff beside his rig. They say he still flags trucks, still calls for help on the radio. But no one ever finds him." I wanted to argue, to laugh it off, to say I was just tired, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. And when I walked back out to my truck, I saw something that made my stomach turn. On the back door of the trailer, traced into the frost, were 5 long handprints. Bare hands, pressed deep, as if someone had held on while I drove. I grew up in a small Alaskan town where the hills are full of old gold mines. Most are closed now. The tunnels are held up by dark wood beams. There are rusty rails on the floor and ice that grows like glass teeth from the ceiling. Every kid hears the same warning: don't go in. Tunnels can fall. Air can go bad. You can get lost. I believe those warnings. Mostly. Late one February, my friend Tack asked if I wanted to hike with him and Eli. He said we would only go to the mine and look from the outside. Just photos, he told me. Daylight in, daylight out. I said yes. We left after lunch. The sky was pale, and the sun felt far away. Our boots squeaked on hard snow. Ravens hopped from spruce to spruce and watched us go by. We took a small sled with tea, a first aid kit, 3 headlamps, extra batteries, a short rope, and a radio. I also brought a little candle in a tin. My uncle taught me that trick. When a flame burns weak in a tunnel, he said, "Go back. Air there is not your friend." We reached the mine mouth in an hour. It was a black mouth and a hillside of white. Old timbers framed the opening like ribs. A little wind came out and carried the smell of wet rock and cold iron. 2 icicles hung over the door. I tapped one and it rang like a tiny bell. "We only go a little ways," I said. "A little," Tack agreed. He smiled, and the white in his breath floated away. Eli nodded. He is quiet, taller than me, and careful with his steps. He had a bright orange hat that made him easy to see. We put on our headlamps and stepped inside. Snow turned to ice a few steps in. The floor felt like old stone with a thin shell of water frozen over it. Our lights made hard white circles on the walls. I saw marks where tools had bitten rock. I saw a cracked yellow sign that said danger, unsafe. Someone had nailed it to a post years ago. The letters had faded, but you could still read them. I lit my little candle and held it in front of me. The flame stood up straight and bright. "Good air," I said. We walked slowly. The tunnel was taller than a room, with heavy beams across the top. They were dark with age and wet with drip water. Old rails ran down the middle. They were red-brown and pitted. A small cart sat off to one side, half buried in ice. I could imagine men pushing it long ago, boots thudding, lamps smoking, voices loud. We had our own voices now. They bounced off the stone and came back to us. Everything we said sounded like someone else was saying it too, a half second later. "Echo," Eli said. He clapped his hands. The sound ran ahead and then ran back. We went maybe 50 steps. I counted. I told myself we would turn around at 100. That felt safe. We tied our rope to a beam near the entrance and paid it out as we walked. It brushed against my leg, and I liked that feeling. It told me which way home was. The tunnel bent a little to the left and then a little to the right. We came to a place where the ceiling was lower and the ice was thick. Long, clear spikes hung down. Water drops clicked into a small pool at our feet. Beyond that, the roof rose again and the walls opened. That is when we heard it. A voice. It was soft at first, like wind moving in a hollow pipe. Then it shaped itself into a word. It sounded like my name. I stopped. My candle flame fluttered and then steadied. "Did you say something?" I asked. "No," Eli said. "Not me," Tack said. He turned his head to listen. His lamp made a bright circle on the wood and stone. The voice came again from ahead. It stretched like it had to travel a long way through tight places. It sounded like water does when it whispers under ice. This time, it said Eli's name. We all stood still. Even the drops seemed to wait. "Echo," Eli whispered. "Maybe," I said. I wanted it to be an echo. I wanted a simple answer, the kind you could fold up and put in your pocket. We walked on, slower now. The rope slid along the floor behind us. I held a candle close and watched the flame. We passed a side tunnel, narrow and dark, with old boards like teeth across its mouth. A cold breath came out of it that did not feel like the other air. "Not that way," I said. "Yes," Eli said. We kept to the main tunnel. We reached a place where the ground changed. The rails stopped. The floor dropped down 2 steps, like shallow stairs cut into rock. I shined my light and saw a black space off to the right. A hole, round and deep. It was a wind's straight-down shaft inside the mine. People dug them to move or to lower levels. My uncle had told me about them. They hide like wells, he said. Snow can cover them. Boards can rot over them. They can eat you. We stayed well back from it. Our lights went down, and then we saw water. It was flat and black and did not move. Ripples ran across it when a drop fell. That was all. The voice came again. This time it said Tak's name. Tak laughed, but it was a small laugh. "I'm right here," he called. His words sped ahead and came back in pieces. The mine gave him back a thin, broken version of his own voice. We moved on. Soon we reached a fork. One tunnel curved left, another right. Our rope was almost out, so I tied it to a post and used chalk to draw an arrow on the wall. I pointed the arrow toward home. Then I drew a second arrow to show we had taken the left path. The chalk felt smooth and small in my glove. We took the left. The air felt colder now. The candle flame leaned a little. Not much, just enough that I noticed. We walked maybe 30 steps. We saw old pipes along the wall. We saw a rotten jacket on the floor. When I touched it, it felt like leaves. We saw boot marks in the dust where some animal had passed. Maybe a fox long ago, maybe a wolverine. The marks were thin and pale with frost. Then we heard a new sound. Not a voice, not water. A small, steady tapping, like metal on metal, but far away. We stopped again. "Drip?" Eli asked. "No," I said. "Different." Tak pointed ahead. "It's that way." I did not want to go toward it, but I did not want to turn around either. Turning around because of a sound felt like fear's decision, not my decision. So we went on slow, headlamps low, boots careful. Around the next curve, the tunnel opened into a room. Miners call them stopes. They took the rich rock out and left big spaces behind. This one had tall posts holding the roof and a mess of broken boards on the floor. There were old drill holes in the walls. The tapping stopped as we stepped in. I lifted the candle. The flame shivered. Then the voice returned. It came from above us this time, like the roof itself was speaking. It did not say our names. It said one word I could not understand, a long word with a rise in the middle and a fall at the end, like someone calling to a friend over wind. Tak looked up. His light followed his chin. There was a dark square cut in the roof. A raise, a climb to another level. A rotted ladder leaned up into it. "Tak," I said. "No." He smiled again, but it did not reach his eyes. "I just want to see," he said. 2 steps. He put one boot on the first rung. The wood creaked, but held. He put the other boot higher. He lifted his head into the dark square. Just he started, the voice said his name again. Soft, close, like someone put their mouth right next to his ear. Tak's shoulders twitched. He moved faster. He stepped up one more rung, and then he was gone into the square. His light swung and showed the rough sides for a second. Then it was only a faint glow above us. "Tak," I called. My echo came down and broke on the floor. "I'm okay," he said. His voice was small. "It opens up. There's." His words blurred into a long, scraping sound, like a stone pushed across ice. Then there was a thud, not hard, just dull, like a sack dropped on soft earth. "Tak," Eli called. He had already moved to the ladder. He put a hand on the side rail and tested it. It felt bad. The wood crushed under his glove like old bread. "Don't climb," I said. "Use the rope." We tied the rope around Eli's waist. I braced my boots and leaned back with all my weight. He put one foot on the first rung and the other on a split in the wall, like a step. He climbed into the square and pulled himself up. "Talk to me," I called up. "Okay," he said. His voice sounded closer now, and I felt better. Then I didn't, because right after he said, "Okay," I heard my own voice, but from above. It was my voice saying, "Okay," back to me, the same tone, the same breath. Echo, I told myself. Just echo. Eli's light swept the ceiling and came back down. He coughed once, quick and dry. "Bad air up here," he said. "Feels heavy." "Come back," I said. "Now." He lowered himself. His face came into view. His eyes were wet and bright. He looked scared. "I don't see him," he said. We both shouted for tack then. We said his name over and over until it did not sound like a name anymore. The mine threw parts of it back at us. Some pieces sounded like we were far away. Some pieces sounded like we were inside the walls. My candle flame slanted and grew short. "We leave," I said. "Now." We backed out of the room and followed our chalk arrows. I kept the candle in front of my face and watched the flame. It shivered and reached for the ground, like it wanted to lie down and sleep. I blew it out and stuffed it in my pocket. We needed to move. At the fork, we turned right, back toward the rope we left tied to the post. The rope touched my ankle again. I felt a little better. We walked faster. That is when the voice came again. It did not sound like wind now. It did not sound like echo. It sounded like tack. It said, "Wait." We stopped. "Where?" I shouted. "Tell us where." "Wait," it said again, the same shape, the same breath, the same piece of fear inside it. It came from behind us, from the way we had just come. Eli turned, raised his lamp, and took one step toward the sound. "No," I said. I grabbed his arm. My hand shook. "If he is moving, we meet him at the entrance. If he is not, we get help." Eli looked at me with a face I will never forget. He wanted to be brave. He wanted to be the friend who runs into the fire. But he is also the friend who thinks. He nodded. We followed the rope, step by step, breath by breath. The tunnel bent and the air grew sweeter. We reached the icicles and the small pool. We reached the old cart. We reached the danger sign. We reached the white mouth of daylight. Outside, the sky had turned pink. The cold hit our faces like clean water. I called the search line on the radio with clumsy fingers. My voice came out thick. I told them what happened and where. They said to stay put. They said not to go back in. It took time, but a rescue team came, 2 from town, 2 from the state, 1 old miner with a face like carved wood. They had meters to test air. They had harnesses and hard hats and long, bright ropes. They listened to our story. They did not smile. They went into the mine with slow feet. We waited outside with our backs to the sun. Ravens moved closer. They tilted their heads and clicked their beaks. I hated them for that. And then I hated myself for hating birds just doing bird things. I breathed steam and watched the door. After a long time, the team came back. Their cheeks were gray. The old miner spoke for them. "The air is poor past the rays," he said. "CO2 pockets. There is water in the winds." We found 1 fresh scrape mark on the wall by the rays, like a boot slipped. We found no blood. We found no sign of him past that room. "Did you hear him?" Eli asked. He did not mean to sound small. He just did. The old miner looked toward the hills. "Sometimes mines sing," he said. "Wind moves through and uses the tunnels like a horn. Sometimes water drips into old cans and makes a drum. Sometimes your own voice comes back wrong. That is all true. But sometimes..." He stopped. He rubbed his thumb along a crack in his glove. "Sometimes we do not know why a voice sounds like a person you love." They marked the mine closed with new tape and a better sign. They told us not to go in again. They told us to send a prayer, if that was our way. They would come back with more people and more gear when the air was safer. We walked home as the light faded and the snow turned blue. That night, I could not sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the dark square in the ceiling and the way Tack's light vanished into it. I heard the thud again, soft and dull. I heard my own voice coming back at me from the stone, changed into something I did not recognize. Around midnight, my radio clicked and hissed. I had left it on the table. It made a small scratching sound, like a finger on paper. Then, through the static, I heard a breath. One short breath, close and human. My name came after it, exactly the way Tack said it when he was joking, drawn out with a smile inside. It was the smallest thing, but it broke me. I went outside and stood under the stars. The cold burned my lungs. The hills were quiet. Somewhere in the dark, the old tunnels ran like veins under the skin of the earth. People in town, said the team, went back 2 more times when the meters read safe. They said the rays was too rotten to climb. They said the wind's water was deep and black and did not give up what fell into it. They said, in a kind voice, that sometimes the land keeps its own count. I did not go with them. I did not go near that hill again for a long time. When I finally did, summer had come and the ground was soft. Green plants crept over the mine tailings like a blanket. The new sign still hung at the door. The tape fluttered in a light wind. I stood there and listened. No voices spoke. I wanted them to. I wanted a call from the dark to tell me a simple thing. Here I am. But the mine was quiet, the way a shut book is quiet. People say there are easy reasons for what we heard. They talk about echo and wind and water. They say fear can bend sound and memory. Maybe that is true. I want it to be true. But sometimes when I'm out on the river and the ice shifts under me, I hear a faint voice go across the open, and it shapes my name, and then Eli's name, the way the mine shaped them. It comes from nowhere and from everywhere, the way winter does. I look up at the hills and think about the candle flame leaning down as if to sleep. I think about a boot slipping on old wood. I think about the soft thud that did not echo at all. This is what I know. We went into the mine as 3. We followed the chalk arrows home as 2. The tunnels kept our names and gave them back to us in broken pieces. And if you go to that hillside on a still day and stand by the black mouth and hold your own breath, you might hear a voice too. It will sound like someone you miss. It will sound like the wind. It will sound like the ground trying to speak. You will not be sure which it is. You will only know that you do not want to follow it. I had always loved the northern lights. They were the one thing about Alaska that made the endless dark of winter feel magical. Most nights, when the aurora spread across the sky like green fire, I would stand outside my little shack on the edge of the frozen lake and watch until my toes went numb. It never felt scary until that winter when I went ice fishing alone and saw something in the lights watching me back. It was February, and the nights stretched so long they swallowed most of the day. The lake near my cabin was solid ice, thick enough to hold a truck, and I often went there with my dog, Nuna, to fish. That night, the air was brittle cold, the kind of cold that made your eyelashes freeze when you blinked. I bundled up, grabbed my auger, a lantern, and a small radio, and headed onto the frozen lake. Nuna trotted at my side, her tail curled high against her back, her breath puffing out in white clouds. The ice creaked under my boots as I drilled a hole. The sound echoed across the empty lake, bouncing off the dark tree line. I lowered my line into the black water and sat on my bucket. My lantern cast a weak yellow glow, but above me, the sky lit up with color. Bands of green twisted and rippled across the stars. Sometimes they flared white. Sometimes a sharp edge of red shimmered at the horizon. They moved like curtains in the wind, alive and restless. I had seen the lights all my life, but that night they felt different. They seemed lower, closer, as if they were bending down to see me. The patterns shifted too quickly, forming shapes that looked like faces, wide, open-mouthed with eyes that pulsed in the sky. I blinked hard and shook my head. Too long outside, I muttered, pulling my coat tighter. But when I looked again, the shapes were still there, following the rhythm of the aurora. Nuna growled low in her throat. Her ears pinned back, and she stared not at the sky, but at the edge of the frozen lake. I turned my head quickly, but all I saw was the black line of spruce trees. Shadows tangled in the branches, but nothing moved. Still, Nuna wouldn't settle. Her growl deepened, turning sharp and anxious. I tried to distract myself with the radio. Static came through at first, then a faint voice from Fairbanks. But halfway through a weather report, the signal broke, and the static twisted into something else. It sounded like whispers, not words I could understand, just a low, broken hum, like many voices speaking at once from under the ice. I turned the dial quickly, but the sound wouldn't go away. It slid under the static, a chorus of distant murmurs that made the hairs on my neck rise. I snapped the radio off and sat in silence. The ice popped and cracked, a normal sound on lakes, but in that moment it felt alive. I leaned forward, peering into the hole I had drilled. The water below was black as ink, and when I shined my lantern close, the surface rippled though there was no wind. For a moment, I thought I saw something pale move beneath, like a hand brushing just under the ice. My stomach knotted, and I yanked the lantern back. When I looked up again, the northern lights had changed. The twisting bands of green and red had formed into a shape so clear I couldn't deny it. A long face, stretching across the sky, with eyes like dark holes. The eyes locked on me. Wherever I moved, they followed, sliding across the stars. It felt less like light and more like a gaze, deep and heavy, pressing against my chest. Nuna barked suddenly and lunged toward the trees. Her leash jerked in my hands. She barked again and again, her voice panicked. I turned my lantern toward the tree line. For a split second, I thought I saw something standing there, tall, thin, its outline blurred like smoke. It had no face, only a pale shape where one should have been. I froze. My breath stuck in my throat. When I blinked, the figure was gone, swallowed by the dark. The air grew colder. My lantern flickered, then dimmed, though the fuel was full. Around me, the lake groaned, a long, low moan that shuddered through the ice. I felt it vibrate up through my boots and into my bones. The whispers returned, this time without the radio. They rose from the hole in the ice, louder now, as if many mouths pressed just beneath the frozen surface. I knelt slowly, heart hammering, and leaned closer. The black water moved. Faces swirled just beneath, faint and gray, their eyes wide, their mouths open as if screaming. They pressed against the ice, blurred by the water, but I knew they were there. My breath fogged against the surface. For one terrifying second, I thought I heard my own name in the voices. My name, spoken by something cold and empty below. I scrambled back, my boots sliding on the ice. My line and bucket tipped, spilling into the hole. Nuna barked furiously, straining at her leash. I grabbed her and ran, the lantern swinging wildly in my hand. Behind me, the hole gurgled and cracked, as though something heavy had pushed against it from below. The northern lights above twisted tighter, the face growing sharper, almost grinning as it stretched across the sky. I didn't look up again. I ran until my cabin came into sight, snow crunching loud under my boots, breath tearing in my throat. I slammed the door shut, shoved the bolt across, and dropped into a chair, shaking. Nuna curled tight against me, still trembling. For the rest of the night, I didn't sleep. The whispers seemed to seep through the walls, faint but constant, like a memory you can't silence. Every so often, I felt a weight on the cabin roof, a slow creak, as if something heavy was walking above me. I clutched my lantern and waited for morning. When the sun finally came, I stepped outside. The lake looked calm, still locked in ice. My bucket was gone, swallowed by the hole. No footprints led to the trees, only mine running back to the cabin. I thought maybe I had imagined it all, until I looked up. In the pale morning sky, faint but still visible, streaks of green shimmered. They bent into shapes I recognized, two dark hollows where eyes should be. They lingered for a moment, watching, before dissolving back into color. I don't fish alone anymore. Some nights, when the aurora is bright, I draw the curtains tight. But even then, I feel it. That gaze. Cold, endless, pressing down from the sky. Watching, waiting. The ground in Alaska doesn't like to be disturbed. My uncle used to say the earth remembers everything that's buried in it, even if people forget. I never thought much about that until the winter I helped a neighbor dig a foundation for his cabin, and we uncovered something that should have stayed frozen forever. It was early December, and the snow had just started to fall in steady blankets. My neighbor, Jonas, had bought a plot of land a few miles from my cabin. He wanted to build a one-room shack before the deep cold set in, so he asked if I'd help him dig the ground for posts. It wasn't much, just a rectangle carved into the permafrost, but he couldn't manage alone. I agreed, thinking it would be simple work. We chopped at the frozen soil with picks and shovels, steam curling from our mouths in the thin light. Every strike against the ground rang out sharp and metallic, as if we were hitting stone. It was exhausting, but the rhythm kept us warm. Jonas kept joking about digging to China, while I muttered about frostbite. By the second day, we had dug maybe 4 feet deep, and that's when my shovel hit something that didn't sound like rock. It gave off a dull, hollow thud. Different. Strange. I dropped to my knees and scraped at the ice with my gloves until a pale, flat surface emerged. At first I thought it was wood. Then I saw the curve. It was a coffin lid trapped in the frozen earth. Jonas stopped laughing when he saw it. His face turned gray under his beard. "No cemeteries out here," he said, shaking his head. "This shouldn't be here." We stood over it, breathing hard, snow drifting around us. I suggested we cover it back up and forget it. But Jonas, stubborn as always, said we should at least check. "What if it's just an old box? Something left from a mining camp?" he said. Against my better judgment, I helped him clear the ice around it until the entire coffin was exposed, wedged tight in the permafrost. The wood was cracked and black with age. We didn't have the tools to lift it, so Jonas pried the lid with the flat end of his pickaxe. The wood splintered, brittle as paper. When the lid gave way, a rush of air burst out, so cold it burned. I'll never forget the smell, like wet soil and iron. Inside lay a body. The skin was pale, almost waxy, preserved by the ice. A man, thin and long-limbed, with sunken eyes and lips pulled back from his teeth. His hands were crossed over his chest, fingers sharp like claws. His clothes were old, wool and leather stitched with frayed thread. Around his neck hung a small pendant carved from bone. We stumbled back, both of us gagging. Jonas cursed under his breath, but his eyes stayed locked on the body. I want to put the lid back, bury it again, but Jonas said we had to leave it open to prove what we found. I didn't like the sound of that, but I didn't argue. My skin prickled just standing there, like the frozen man was staring at us though his eyes were shut. That night, the cabin we were sleeping in felt wrong. The stove burned hot, but the air stayed cold, as if something had followed us in from the ground. Every time the wind howled outside, it seemed to echo inside the walls. Jonas tried to joke about our frozen friend, but his laugh came out thin. Nuna, my dog, refused to come near the cabin door. She sat with her back pressed against me, growling low into the night. Around midnight, I woke to a sound I'll never forget, a knocking from beneath the floorboards. Slow, steady like fists pounding on wood. I froze in my bed, holding my breath. Jonas sat up too, his eyes wide in the dark. "It's just the wood shifting," he whispered, though we both knew it wasn't. The knocking went on, closer now, traveling under the floor like something crawling just beneath us. Then it stopped. I barely slept after that. At dawn, I told Jonas I was leaving, that we should cover the coffin and let it stay where it belonged. He argued, saying we could contact the state, maybe even get money for the discovery. But when we walked back to the site, something had changed. The coffin was empty. The lid lay half open, snow filling the cracks. The body was gone. Only the pendant remained, lying in the hollow like it had been placed there on purpose. Jonas swore and cursed, blaming animals, but no tracks marked the snow around the pit. The ground was untouched except for ours. I felt a weight press into my chest. Something in me whispered that the body hadn't been taken. It had walked out on its own. That night, Jonas insisted on keeping the pendant. He strung it on a cord and wore it around his neck, laughing nervously about how it was proof. I wanted nothing to do with it. I told him it felt wrong, but he wouldn't listen. He wore it even when he slept. The knocking returned, louder this time. It shook the stovepipe and rattled the lanterns. Jonas sat up, clutching the pendant. His face looked sick, pale, and sweating. "It's him," he whispered. "He wants it back." I told him to throw it away, but he shook his head. "It's mine now." The pounding grew until it felt like the floor would split. Then all at once it stopped. Silence filled the cabin, thick and heavy. Jonas laid back down, muttering that it was over. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, too scared to move. When morning came, Jonas was gone. His bed was empty, the blanket neatly folded. The pendant hung on the wall by a nail, swaying slightly as if it had just been placed there. I searched the cabin, the trees, the lake. His tracks led to the pit and ended there. No return prints, no sign of him anywhere. I covered the coffin back with dirt and snow, hands numb, heart pounding with dread. I left the pendant where it hung. I couldn't touch it. When I finally returned home, I locked the door and didn't leave for days. Sometimes in winter, when the ground is hard and the nights are endless, I still hear the knocking. Not in the cabin we built, but under my own floor. Slow, steady, patient. I never dig anymore. I never disturb the earth. Because my uncle was right, the ground remembers, and some things should never be pulled from its frozen sleep. When you live in Alaska long enough, you get used to people disappearing. Storms roll in, rivers swell, and ice breaks. Planes go down. Hunters wander too far into the backcountry and never come back. The land is vast, and it doesn't give second chances. But even knowing that, I can't shake the memory of the hunting trip in Denali when 3 men vanished, and I was the only one left to tell what happened. It was late September, just before the snow came heavy, when I joined a small group headed into the park. There were 4 of us, me, a man named Carl who'd hunted these valleys his whole life, his younger cousin Peter, and an older fellow named Ray who swore he knew every ridge in Denali by heart. We set out to track moose. The air was sharp, the sky low and gray, and the tundra glowed red and gold under the dying autumn sun. We hiked all day with rifles slung across our backs, packs heavy with supplies, and the crisp silence of the wilderness pressing around us. By evening, we found an abandoned campsite tucked into a grove of twisted spruce. The fire pit was still there, ringed with stones, but the tents were gone. What caught our eyes, though, were the belongings left behind. A pair of rifles leaning against a tree, an axe stuck in a stump, a half-empty box of shells, and 3 sets of boots arranged neatly side by side. The ground was frozen enough that the prints around them still showed. Men's boots, pacing back and forth, circling the camp. "This doesn't look right," Carl muttered, crouching by the fire pit. He lifted a notebook that lay half buried in frost. The cover was torn and damp, the pages warped. He flipped it open, and we crowded close to read. The writing was hurried, scrawled in pencil. "It watches us at night. We hear it circling the tents. Last night, it stood between us. Too tall, too pale, not a bear." The final page ended mid-sentence. "If anyone finds this, the rest was just a tear through the paper." Peter laughed nervously, saying it was just a camp prank, some boar hunter's joke. But his voice cracked, and no one believed it. I felt a chill deeper than the weather. Whoever had written it had been scared, and scared men don't just leave behind food, rifles, and boots. We debated leaving then and there, but the daylight was short and the trek back long. Reluctantly, we set up our own camp nearby, telling ourselves it was just an old abandoned site. I kept glancing at the tree line, half expecting someone or something to be standing there watching. That night, the wind died and the forest went silent. No owls, no cracking branches, no sounds of life at all. We sat around a small fire, the shadows stretching long, until we crawled into our tents. I shared one with Carl, while Peter and Ray took another. I didn't sleep much. Every time I drifted off, I woke to the sound of footsteps circling outside. Slow, deliberate, crunching in the frost. Carl heard it too. I felt him stiffen beside me. "Probably moose," he whispered, but the steps were too light for moose, too heavy for fox. They circled again and again, until just before dawn when they stopped. When we stepped out, there were no prints. The frost on the ground was smooth, untouched, except for our own. We hunted through the day, but none of us could focus. Every shadow in the trees felt too tall. Every flicker of light on the hills felt like movement. By dusk, we returned to camp empty-handed. Ray said he'd seen something white darting between the spruces, tall and thin. Carl told him it was his eyes playing tricks in the low light. But I saw the way Carl's hand trembled when he cleaned his rifle. That second night is burned into me. I woke to my name being whispered outside the tent. Not called loudly, but whispered like someone crouching right beside the canvas. My heart froze. I lay still, barely breathing. Then it whispered again, clearer, "Come out." Carl shifted beside me. "Did you hear that?" he breathed. Before I could answer, a scream tore through the night from Peter and Ray's tent. "Hi!" Panicked cut short. We scrambled out, rifles in hand. Their tent was empty. The flap hung open, and their packs were still inside. We shined our flashlights toward the trees, but the beams caught nothing except the fog of our breath. Then we saw it. Between two spruce, maybe 30 yards away, stood something tall and pale. At first I thought it was a man, but it was wrong. Its limbs too long, its body too thin, its face a white blur without features. It didn't move, didn't flinch against the light. It just stood there, watching us. Carl fired a shot. The crack echoed through the valley, but the figure didn't fall. When the smoke cleared, it was gone. We searched until our legs shook, calling their names, firing into the air. No prints, no blood, no sign of where Peter and Ray had gone. It was as if the trees had swallowed them whole. By dawn, we staggered back to camp, hollow-eyed and broken. Carl didn't speak. He just stared into the fire, mumbling prayers under his breath. I wanted to leave, but Carl insisted we wait, convinced Peter and Ray might return. I hated myself for staying, but I couldn't leave him alone. That night, I woke to the sound of Carl unzipping the tent. He stepped outside without his rifle, moving like he was sleepwalking. I grabbed my lantern and followed. The fire had burned down low, and the cold gnawed through my clothes. Carl walked toward the tree line. His breath came out in soft clouds. I called his name, but he didn't turn. Then I saw what he was walking toward. The pale figure stood just beyond the last line of spruce. Taller now, its head nearly brushing the lowest branches. Its arms hung low, almost to its knees, and its body shimmered faintly in the darkness, like it wasn't entirely solid. Carl whispered something I couldn't hear and kept walking. I ran to him, grabbed his arm, but he wrenched free with a strength I didn't know he had. "It's them," he gasped. "They're with it. I can't hear them." Before I could stop him, he vanished into the trees. The pale figure melted back into the dark. The forest swallowed both. I searched until dawn, screaming his name, my voice raw, but the forest gave nothing back. No tracks, no broken branches, no trace of him at all. Just silence. When I finally stumbled out of Denali days later, I was alone. The rangers searched, but they found nothing. Not Peter, not Ray, not Carl. Only the abandoned campsite with its rifles and boots, and the notebook with its last half-written sentence. I tried to explain, but my story never made sense to them. They said people vanish in the wilderness all the time. They said I was in shock, that I imagined things after days without sleep. I stopped trying to convince them, but I know what I saw. I know something out there walked in the dark, circling us, waiting. I know it whispered my name, and I know it took them one by one until I was the only one left. And some nights, when the wind dies and the forest goes silent, I hear it again. Slow footsteps circling outside my cabin, patient as ever. And I know that one day, when the silence lasts too long, it won't be circling anymore. It'll be standing right outside my door. The night I picked her up, the highway felt endless and empty, like a thin line drawn across a page of white. I was driving north on the parks, hauling boxes of canned food and fuel filters to a tiny store near Nenana. The radio said a band of heavy snow would drop fast after dark. I wanted to beat it, but Alaska has its own plans. By mile after mile, the wind rose and the world narrowed to whatever my headlights could catch before the snow swallowed it again. I know winter roads. I keep a sleeping bag, a shovel, candles, a first aid kit, and a bright orange thermos of coffee behind my seat. I had chains on the rear tires and a block heater cord coiled like a snake in the cab. My old truck rattled and hummed. The wipers squealed across the glass. The heater blew hard, but the air still felt thin and mean, the kind that bites inside your nose. The sky was a low ceiling of gray, and the spruce on both sides of the road bent like they were tired of holding snow. I passed the last open gas station before the pass and watched the glow of its sign vanish in the mirror. After that, there were no more lights, just my two beams and the white rush pouring through them. Sometimes the wind pushed the whole truck sideways. Sometimes a break in the clouds showed a slice of star, then closed again like an eye. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles went white and told myself to keep looking far, not just at the snow dancing right in front of me. That was when I saw her. At first, she was only a darker shape inside the storm, a smudge that didn't move the way snow moves. Then the shape lifted an arm, A person stood on the shoulder, waving, more like raising a hand than tried to stop me, like a quiet question. I hit my blinker out of habit, even though no one was behind me, and eased the truck to the side. The tires crunched down through a drift, and the wind hammered the door when I opened it. She stood there in the beam of my headlight, covered in frost like she'd been dipped in glass. Her parka was old and blue, the kind with a fake fur rough gone thin with years. She wore no gloves. Her hands were red and stiff. Her hair was dark and stuck to her cheeks in icy strands. I could not see her eyes clearly because ice crystals clung to her eyelashes, but I felt she was watching me as if I had been late. "Get in," I said, and my voice came out rough. "It's too cold to talk out here." She climbed into the passenger seat and shut the door softly, like she did not want to wake someone. Cold poured off her. It pulled the warmth right out of the cab. Her breath came in small white puffs, and when she held her hands over the heater vents, the skin looked wrong, pale and shiny like wax. I pulled a wool blanket from behind my seat and handed it to her. She tucked it around her legs. Only then did I notice she wore old hiking boots, the leather cracked, the laces frayed. Snow stuck to them in hard clumps. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was quiet and flat, like someone who had been tired for a long time. I thought no one would stop. "Where are you headed?" I asked, pulling back onto the road. The wipers beat a steady song. "Nanana," she said. "Home. That is not far in summer, but in a storm it can feel like another world." I told her I was going that way. She nodded once. We drove in silence for a while. The snow slapped the windshield. The heater coughed and then steadied. I watched the center line appear and vanish and appear again, a thin yellow snake wriggling through white. "I didn't see a car," I just said finally. "Did you break down?" She looked at her hands, at the strange red shine of them. "It stopped," she said. Then it went dark. I couldn't make it start again. She paused. I thought I could walk the rest. In this, I tried to keep my voice gentle and not scold her like a child. "You're lucky I saw you." "I waited," she said. "I didn't want to leave." But the dark came so fast. I offered her coffee. She shook her head without looking up. I turned the dial on the radio, hoping for music to fill the quiet, but the storm only gave me static and thin, broken voices reading road warnings far away. I left it off. The truck was its own sound. Engine, wipers, heater, a small rattle somewhere in the dash that only showed up on bad nights. After a few miles, she spoke again. "I'm sorry," she said. "I lost my gloves." I glanced at her hands. The skin was ringed where gloves would have ended, like a mark left by long use. I pulled off my own spare pair from the space between the seats, big, ugly orange mitts I keep for emergencies, and set them on her lap. She did not put them on, only touched them like she was checking if they were real. "What's your name?" I asked because it felt wrong not to know who was shivering beside me. She turned her head toward the side window. In the reflection, the curve of her cheek looked young and old at the same time. "Lena," she said after a moment. The name felt heavy in the cab, like a stone dropped into water. "I'm Tom," I said. "We'll get you home, Lena." She nodded. "I have to see my girl," she said so soft I almost missed it. "She's probably waiting at the window." I drove and pictured a child pressed to cold glass in a small house in Nanana, a lamp burning inside, a thin curtain pulled aside by a small hand. The thought set a hook in me, a quick sharp pull of worry that was not mine and still felt like mine. I found I had eased off the gas, as if going slow would keep us in the space before we had to know anymore. The storm worsened. The snow changed from big lazy flakes to hard sand that stung when the wind slammed it. The road faded to one wide white ribbon. Drifts crept in like fingers. I leaned forward as if that would help me see. Each time the wind shoved the truck, I remembered the stories of cars found on their sides and ditches in the morning, the tracks filled in by night, the drivers inside like they had been drawn in by sleep. Beside me, Lena sat very still. She did not take off the blanket or put on the mitts or sip the coffee. She watched the side window as if something might run along with us, just outside the reach of the light. When the heater coughed again, she flinched like the sound had hurt her ears. "Are you okay?" I asked. She nodded. "It gets loud in the wind," she said. "Sometimes it sounds like people talking, but it's just the snow." I listened. The wind did have voices in it if you were alone long enough, singing wires, the low moan the highway makes when it runs under your tires, a branch scraping a fender. I told myself that is all it was. Then the radio woke up all on its own and hissed, and a thin voice I did not recognize said, "Wide out near the river," before the static swallowed it again. "Do you know the little blue house by the tracks?" Lena asked suddenly. "It has a fence with a broken board. We used to say it looked like a missing tooth." She smiled once, a small, sad bend at the mouth, like a habit her face had learned and forgotten. "I think I know it," I said, though I was not sure. In these towns, a dozen small homes could match that picture. But it seemed to ease her to think of a place that had heat and lights and a window with a girl behind it. So I said yes. We drove over the bridge where the river sounds different under the ice, a low drum you can feel in your bones. The wind lifted a sheet of snow off the roadway and tossed it like a blanket. For a second, I had no road at all, only white, and I felt how thin the difference is between going on and not going on. When the world came back, the center line was under my left tire. I eased us straight and kept my voice level. "Almost there," I said. "Almost," she said, and her lips moved around the word like it was a prayer. I thought then about the winter. I was 12, and my mother got stuck on the highway coming back from the grocery store. She sat in her old car for 3 hours, wrapped in a coat too thin for real cold, because the engine had died and she did not want to leave her bags. She kept turning the key and listening to nothing. When my father found her, she was crying and angry, not because she was afraid, but because she felt foolish to be so cold inside a thing meant to keep people warm. We never went anywhere without extra blankets after that. Even after they died, I kept a bundle of their wool throws behind my own seat like a promise to nobody and to everyone. "I'm sorry," Lena said again, and I didn't know why she was sorry and didn't ask. We were both quiet, and in that quiet the truck's seat creaked, and I remembered I had not been on a drive like this with anyone for a long time. We reached the turnoff. The plows had not been through. The road to town looked like a field with guesses cut into it. I took it slow, letting the tires find their way. Houses appeared as shadows, then boxes of yellow glass, then vanished behind snow again. I could not tell one street from the next, but the way the snow was piled told me where to go, the way a river tells you where it has been by the marks it leaves on stone. "There," Lena said, pointing with one stiff finger. "The blue one." I saw it then, small and hunched, with a sagging porch and a fence with one slat missing. A light burned in the front room. The snow was high against the steps. No tracks led to the door. I swung in and stopped as close as I could. The engine hummed, and the heater blew hard and hot. "We made it," I said. "Do you want to walk you up?" She was already unbuckling, though I had not seen her buckle in. She pulled the blanket tight around her shoulders and opened the door. Cold reached in like a hand. Snow blew across the seat and melted in tiny stars on the fabric. She paused with one boot on the step and looked at me. Up close, her eyes were very dark, and there was a shine in them like tears, but not tears. "Thank you, Tom," she said. She said my name as if she were surprised by it, as if it reminded her of a name she once said often and had set down on a shelf for years. "Do you want me to wait?" I asked because it felt wrong to let her vanish into a storm without knowing she had gotten inside. She shook her head. "You should keep going," she said. "The road gets worse after town." She hesitated. "Please take the mitts. You'll need them more." "You keep them," I said. "I have another pair in the back." She touched the mitts once more like someone saying goodbye to a toy they used to play with, and then left them on the seat. She stepped out into the storm, pulled the blanket around her face, and walked toward the house. I watched her go. She did not seem to sink into the snow. She moved like someone who had been walking a long time and had learned not to waste steps. When she reached the porch, the wind lifted and bent around her. For a moment, I could see the path it took in the air, smooth and curved, like it was going around something that was not there. She did not knock. She put her hand on the door and pushed. The door opened. Warm light spilled out, a long yellow tongue on the snow. She turned her head back toward me, and though I could not see her face in the glare, I felt as if she smiled. Then she stepped inside, and the door closed. I let out a breath I did not know I had been holding. The seat where she had been sitting was wet and cold. The heater finally got ahead of the cold, and the air turned from biting to dry. I reached for the mitts to put them back behind the seat and found something tucked underneath them. A small blue wool glove, child-sized, with a white button sewn on the wrist. It was damp and smelled faintly of smoke in winter. I sat there with the glove in my hand and stared at the house. No one came to the window. No shadow crossed behind the curtains. The storm thickened, and sharp little crystals drifted in the box of light that leaked out around the edges of the door. I honked once, lightly, as if to say, "You're home," to no one who could hear it. Then I put the truck in gear and pulled away. The road past town was worse, the kind that makes your jaw ache from keeping your teeth clenched. My hand shook not from cold now, but from something I did not want to name. The glove lay on the seat like a small bluebird. Each time the truck slid and caught, I reached over and touched it with my fingertips, as if it could keep the tires on the ground. I made my delivery late. The store owner, a man named Oiva with a face like a cliff, signed for the boxes and looked at me just once, as if he could see the wreckage of the drive in my eyes. "Storm's angry," he said. "You sleeping here?" "I'll try for clear," I said, "if the plows have been through." He shrugged like a man who has learned not to argue with another man's bad plan. "Coffee's on," he said. "Warm up before you go." I sat at the little counter with my hands wrapped around a cup and watched the snow smear the world outside. Oiva moved slow, like a person used to long winters. After a few minutes, I said, "Do you know the blue house by the tracks? The one with the broken fence?" He turned and set his hands on the counter. "Everyone knows that house," he said. "It's been empty a long time." Empty. The word sat in my stomach and did not move. "Used to be Lena's place," he added, "because in small towns names never really vanish. Her little girl would sit in the window for hours waiting when the weather turned. Her husband worked on the slope then. One winter, must have been 98 or 99, the storm came hard, and Lena tried to make it home from the highway. Her car died. They found it 2 days later, buried to the mirrors. They never found her. I did not realize I was still holding the small blue glove until it fell from my lap and landed on the floor with a soft, wet sound. Oiva bent and picked it up. His face changed. Not surprise exactly. More like the way a face softens when a person recognizes a song from long ago. "My wife used to sew buttons like that," he said, "on the kids' mitts so they could tell left from right." He turned it over in his hands and then gave it back to me. "Storms have a way of giving things back when they're done," he said. "Sometimes those things don't look like what you lost." I left the store with the glove in my pocket and drove to the lodge. The plows had gone through once, making tall white walls on both sides like a hallway from some other life. I slept that night with my boots by the door and my coat over the chair. The wind pushed and pushed at the windows, as if it wanted to come in and sit with me. In the middle of the night, I woke to a sound from the passenger seat, the soft creak of leather, the hiss of a breath that isn't yours. I did not turn my head. I lay very still and kept my eyes on the dark. Eventually, the sound faded. The heater clicked. The storm moved farther down the road. In the morning, the sky was pale and tired but clear. I drove back through town. The blue house looked smaller in daylight. The fence's missing slat made a clean gap like a tooth a child had lost and was proud of. No light burned inside. No smoke came from the chimney. I stopped and walked to the porch. My boots made real, human prints, and seeing them felt like proof of something that did not need proof. I don't know what I expected, to see my own blanket folded on the chair, to smell wet wool, to find the door unlocked and a warm square on the floor where someone had stood. The door was shut tight. The lock was rusty. The window was dusty from the inside in a way a storm can't touch. I slid the small blue glove through the crack under the door and left it there. I stood for a moment with my palm on the wood and said, "She got home," because I wanted that to be true, and because sometimes you have to say a thing out loud for it to be true enough to live with. I drove away and kept my eyes on the road. For a long time after, whenever the weather turned hard and the highway emptied and the world narrowed to two beams and a line of yellow that came and went, I would feel the seat beside me grow cold and heavy. I would catch the faintest smell of wet wool. I would see, just in the corner of the glass, the blur of a face that could have been anyone's, could have been mine, could have been a person named Lena who had tried to get home and almost made it. Some folks say they're easy answers. They say I was tired and scared and saw a shape that wasn't there. They say I stopped by an empty house and told myself a story to fit what I wanted to believe about the world, which is that it gives back what storms take. Maybe they are right. Maybe it was just a night and a road and a man trying to be decent. But even now, on certain winter nights, the radio will come alive for no reason, and a thin voice I don't know will lift out of the static and say just one word, home, and go quiet again. When that happens, I keep the passenger seat clear, and I drive a little slower, and I talk to the empty space beside me like I'm talking to someone who is almost there. And if I pass a person on the shoulder in a blue parka lifting a hand, I stop. I will always stop, because there are girls who wait at windows with small blue gloves and buttons sewn on the wrist, and some promises belong to nobody and to everyone. I worked 3 seasons up on the North Slope near Prudhoe Bay. Most of the job was endless cold, drilling rigs against a flat horizon, and nights that felt like they would never end. It was money that kept us there. Money and the stubborn idea that we could outlast the cold. The tundra has its own silence. It's not like the quiet of a forest or a lake. It's heavy, pressing, like the land itself has been holding its breath for thousands of years. When you stand out there at night, the wind slips across the snow and you hear only your own heart in your ears. That's why the first time I heard the drumming, I knew something wasn't right. It was late February. The camp generators hummed, the rigs groaned, and the night was a wall of black. I was outside checking lines near the edge of the floodlights when I felt it first, before I even heard it, a low thump moving through the ground, steady as a heartbeat. Then came the sound, faint but clear, a rhythm, like hands striking stretched skin. I froze. Out there, nothing makes that sound. No machinery, no animal. It carried across the tundra, echoing in a place where echoes shouldn't exist. The pattern was strange too, not random. It had shape, like a song you almost remember. I hurried back inside and told the others. Most laughed. "You've been out in the cold too long," one of the welders said. Another said it was probably ice shifting underground. But one man, an older Inupiaq named Sila, didn't laugh. He just looked at me and said, "You heard them." I asked him what he meant, but he wouldn't answer. That night, lying in my bunk, I kept hearing it, faint through the walls, as if the tundra itself was carrying it into camp. The next evening, I stepped outside again, just to prove to myself I wasn't imagining it. The cold cut through my coat, the wind burned my eyes, and the land stretched out flat and endless under a curtain of northern lights. And then it began, the drumming, soft at first, then louder, as if a circle of unseen hands was beating all around me. The sound rose and fell with the green waves in the sky. I wanted to run, but my legs rooted to the snow. The lights above bent and twisted, and for a moment I thought I saw shapes moving in them, figures tall and thin, stepping in rhythm with the sound. I blinked, and the shapes dissolved back into the light. When I stumbled back into camp, my skin numb and my chest tight, Silo was waiting. He led me to the mess hall and poured me strong coffee. Then, in a low voice, he told me a story. Long before the rigs, long before the pipeline, the tundra belonged to the people and to the spirits that lived under it. The drumming, he said, was a warning. Spirits walked the land when they were restless, calling out to remind the living they were never alone. If you hear the drums, he said, you don't follow them. You don't answer. You keep your eyes down and your mouth shut. I asked him what would happen if someone did answer. He only shook his head and said, some men don't come back. The next week, one of the younger guys, Mike, a loudmouth from Texas, came into the mess hall saying he'd heard the drums too. He was laughing, saying it gave him goosebumps, that it sounded like a powwow out on the ice. I'll go dance with them if they want, he joked. Most laughed along, but Sela went pale. 2 nights later, Mike was gone. His parka was still on his bunk, his boots by the door. The only thing missing was him. We searched in the morning. The snow was smooth, no tracks leading away from camp. Nothing but the wide white emptiness. The foreman radioed for help, and they combed the area with snow machines, but there was no sign, not a scrap of fabric, not a single footprint. That night, the drumming was louder than ever. We all heard it, every man in camp. It circled the buildings, steady and patient, echoing in our chests. No one laughed this time. We stayed inside, lights burning, listening as the rhythm went on and on until the sun came up gray and weak. Mike was never found. His name was added to a list of accidents, of disappearances that happen too often in a land this harsh. But I know better. We all do. He joked about joining the drums, and they took him. I left the slope after that season. I told myself it was just the cold, just the dark getting into my head, but I can still hear it sometimes. On the coldest nights, when the wind dies and the land goes silent, I feel that low thump in the ground like a heart too big to belong to anything human. Then the rhythm begins, faint and steady, and I know they're still out there, walking the tundra, keeping time. And I know not to answer. There's a place outside Fairbanks that locals whisper about, a lake that never freezes, even when winter sinks its teeth into the earth and holds everything else in ice. I used to think it was just one of those stories, like the one about lights in the forest or the hunter who never came back. But then I went there myself, dared by friends, and I learned that some stories are warnings, not entertainment. I was 17 at the time. It was January, and the cold was so sharp it made your teeth ache. My friends, Evan and Mark, were bored out of their skulls, stuck in a town where winter drags on forever. Somebody at school had told us about the lake. They said it was a dark pool hidden in the woods, small and round, and no matter how low the temperature dropped, the water never froze. Kids dared each other to touch it, even swim in it. One boy had supposedly gone under and never come back, though no one could prove it. Evan was the one who wanted to see it. He lived for that kind of thing, always hunting for a thrill. Mark just laughed and went along with anything. And me, I didn't want to be the coward. So one Saturday, we loaded up Mark's beat-up snowmobile and headed out into the woods. The ride was long. Spruce trees hunched heavy with snow leaned over the trail, and the sky was the dull gray of frozen steel. Our breath fogged up inside our scarves, and the engine whined until it felt like part of my skull. I kept thinking about how dangerous it was to be out there if anything went wrong, if the sled broke, if one of us got hurt. But I didn't say it. I just followed. After an hour, Evan pointed ahead. "There!" he shouted over the engine. The trail opened into a clearing, and at the center sat the lake. It wasn't big, maybe the size of a football field, but every inch of it was black water, calm and still. Snow piled thick on the banks, but the surface of the lake rippled softly, like something was breathing beneath. Mist rose from it in faint curls, even though the air was well below zero. We killed the engine, and the silence pressed down hard. My ears rang in the sudden quiet. The only sound was the slow lap of water against ice-crusted rocks. Evan grinned. "Told you. Creepy as hell." Mark picked up a rock and tossed it in. It splashed, the sound sharp and wrong in that frozen landscape. The ripples spread across the whole surface, and for a moment I swore I saw something pale glide just under the water before it vanished. "Bet you won't touch it," Evan said, elbowing me. I wanted to laugh it off, but my stomach knotted. Something about the lake made my skin crawl. Still, I walked down to the edge, knelt, and stretched out my glove. The water was warmer than it should have been, almost like bath water. That was impossible, but it soaked into my glove, and the heat lingered on my skin even after I yanked it back. "Crazy," Mark muttered. "How's it not frozen?" "Geothermal spring," Evan said like he knew what he was talking about. Then he grinned again. "I dare you to swim in it." I froze. "You're out of your damn mind," I said. But Mark was already laughing. "Yeah, come on. 5 minutes. Prove you're not scared." Evan stripped his coat, then his boots, moving fast before the cold could stop him. His breath came in great clouds. "If I do it, you both have to," he said. "Don't," I tried. "Seriously, don't." But he waded in. The water swallowed his legs, then his chest, steam rising around him. He gasped and laughed at the same time, sending ripples across the surface. "It's warm," he shouted. "Not bad at all." Mark cheered. "Your turn, man." I shook my head. "This is stupid. Get out." But Evan dove forward and disappeared. The ripples spread wide and then stilled. The mist swirled. Seconds passed. He didn't come up. Mark laughed nervously. "He's screwing with us." But my chest tightened. 30 seconds. 40. Evan, I shouted. I dropped to my knees at the edge, scanning the water. Nothing. Just blackness shifting gently like oil. A minute passed. Too long. I was already kicking off my boots, yanking at my coat, when suddenly Evan broke the surface with a splash. He gasped and dragged himself onto the bank, water streaming from his hair and clothes. His lips were blue, his eyes wide. Jesus, Mark breathed, helping him up. You're crazy. Evan coughed, shivering hard. Something grabbed me, he stammered. Pull me down. We thought he was joking, but then he shoved his sleeve up. Finger-shaped bruises were already rising along his arm. Too long, too thin, too sharp for human hands. We didn't laugh anymore. We wrapped him in blankets, got the sled started, and drove back like the devil was chasing us. For days after, Evan was different. He didn't joke. He didn't laugh. He sat in silence, staring at his arm. The bruises darkened to black. Sometimes he scratched at them until the skin bled. When I asked him what had happened under the water, he just shook his head. Voices, he whispered once. They wanted me to stay. Mark tried to lighten things, saying Evan had just panicked, but I saw the way his eyes flicked away from the bruises. He was scared too. Then, 2 weeks later, Evan vanished. His parents called everyone, searched everywhere. His boots and coat were still by the door. No tracks in the snow outside. It was like he just walked out barefoot into the cold and kept walking. When I heard the news, I knew. He hadn't walked anywhere. The lake had called him back. I went back once alone, months later when spring was coming and the snow had started to rot into slush. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I'd see Evan, or at least find a sign. The lake looked the same, dark, calm, breathing mist. The snowmelt poured into it, but never changed its level. I walked to the bank and saw something tangled in the reeds. A glove. Evan's glove. The one he dropped when he went into the water. I picked it up with shaking hands. It was soaked but warm, warmer than my own skin. That night, I dreamed of him. He stood at the edge of my bed, dripping, his skin pale and waxy, his mouth open but no breath coming out. Water pooled on the floor beneath him. When I woke, the sheet at the foot of my bed was wet. I never told anyone. Not Mark, not Evan's parents, no one. Some things can't be explained, and even if they could, no one would believe. People still talk about the lake. Kids dare each other to find it, to touch it, to swim. Sometimes another boy or girl disappears in winter, and folks say it was an accident, bad weather, bad judgment. But I know better. There's something in that water, something that waits, patient and quiet, in the dark beneath the mist. It doesn't freeze because it isn't just water. It's a mouth, and once it tastes you, it doesn't let go. And when I close my eyes at night, sometimes I hear it. A slow ripple, a faint splash. My name, whispered in a voice I know too well. It's Evan, still calling from the lake that never melts. I worked a night shift at a small emergency radio station on the edge of Nome. Most nights were the same, static, the occasional fishing boat, maybe a stranded snowmobiler calling in for help. It was lonely work, but I didn't mind. The world outside was endless dark and cold, and the radio kept me company. The night it happened was late January, when the sun barely peaks over the horizon and then slips back down again like it's too tired to try. The wind had been hammering town all day, carrying snow sideways through the streets, piling it against doors until they wouldn't open. By the time my shift started, the storm had eased, but the world outside was still white and empty. The radio hummed, steady and patient, like it was waiting. Around 2 a.m, a voice came through the static. It was faint at first, broken by bursts of hiss, but I caught enough. Help, lost storm, anyone? I straightened in my chair and pressed the headset closer. This is Nome Emergency Station, I said. Identify yourself. There was silence, then a sharp crack, and then the voice again, clearer this time. Name's Daniel, the man said. His voice was hoarse, ragged. Snowmobile died, don't know where I am. It's so cold. Please, help me. I scribbled notes, my pen shaking. Can you see any markers, Daniel? Any road signs? Nothing, he gasped. Just white. Just wind. I don't think I can feel my hands. My heart pounded. This happens sometimes. People got caught in storms, machines broke down. We dispatched search teams and usually found them huddled under tarps or half buried in snowdrifts. But something in his voice chilled me. It wasn't just fear. It was despair. I checked the coordinates on the signal. The location came through faint, bouncing strangely, but it looked like the signal was coming from just outside town, 2 miles, maybe less. Relief flooded me. He wasn't far. "I'm sending help," I told him. "Stay on the line. Keep talking so we can track you." He coughed, a dry, rattling sound. "Please hurry." I called dispatch, gave them the signal. A snowcat and 2 men headed out. While they moved, I stayed on the radio. I asked Daniel about his snowmobile, his clothes, if he had a shelter. He answered in short, weak bursts. "Ran out of gas. Coat's thin. Tried to walk. My legs." Each word seemed harder to drag out of him. Finally, he whispered, "I don't think I can keep my eyes open." "Don't sleep," I urged. "Help is close. Just a few more minutes." The line went quiet. I panicked. "Daniel, can you hear me? Say something." Static filled the headset. Then, after a long pause, came a whisper so faint I thought I imagined it. "It's right here." "What's right there?" I demanded. "Daniel, what do you see?" But the line cut dead. The rescue team reached the coordinates 10 minutes later. They reported back. Nothing. No snowmobile, no tracks, no sign of anyone at all. The snow was untouched except for their own prints. I argued, shouting into the radio that I'd heard him, that he had to be there. But they circled the area, shining spotlights, digging through drifts. Nothing. The coordinates were accurate. They were standing on the exact spot. I sat there in the radio room, my headset buzzing with static, my notes spread out under the lamp. I stared at the name I had written, Daniel, and felt something cold creep into me that had nothing to do with winter. I didn't sleep when my shift ended. I couldn't. The voice haunted me. The way he whispered, "It's right here," like he wasn't alone out there in the snow. 2 days later, curiosity dragged me to the archives. Our little station kept old logs, handwritten notes going back decades. I flipped through yellowed pages until I froze. January 1979. Distress call. Name, Daniel. Snowmobile broke down. Said he was cold, couldn't feel his hands. Coordinates. Same location. Rescue team dispatched. Nothing found. I kept flipping. There were more. 1985, 1992, 2006. Always winter. Always the same voice, the same name. Daniel. Always from the same spot. And always nothing found. I slammed the book shut, my breath fogging in the cold air of the archive room. My hand shook as I carried the log back. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, a coincidence, some glitch in the signal. But deep down, I knew better. That night, I went back on shift. I told myself I was imagining things, but when the clock crept toward 2 a.m., my stomach knotted. I stared at the radio, daring it to come alive. And it did. Static, then a voice. The same voice. "Help storm, anyone." My blood went cold. "Daniel." I whispered. The line crackled. "It's so cold. Please, help me." I dropped the headset onto the desk. My hands covered my face. I couldn't do it again. I couldn't listen to him die a second time. But the radio kept hissing, his voice begging, thin and broken. Finally, I forced myself to answer. "Daniel, what's out there with you?" For a long moment, only static. Then it's waiting. Always waiting. I can't see its face. His words dissolved into a cough, then into silence. I never told dispatch. I never reported the call. What would I say? That a ghost kept dialing us from the edge of town? That the tundra itself was speaking through the wires? Sometimes I drive past that stretch of land. It's nothing special, just flat white snow, a few bent spruce, the wind tearing across the ground. But every time I pass, I feel the hair on my neck rise. The place feels hungry, like it remembers every man who's ever wandered too close. And every winter, around 2 a.m., the radio still crackles. A man still calls, always the same name, always the same plea. I don't answer anymore. I sit there in silence, headset on, and listen as his voice fades into static as it has for decades. But sometimes, just before the line goes dead, I hear him whisper something new. Not "help me," not "I'm cold," but "you'll be next."